the ice cracked with a sound like thunder beneath Europa's twilight shell. Fissures, kilometers long, raced across the moon's surface as gravitational tremors pulsed from below. Far beneath the frozen crust, buried for centuries in a saltwater abyss, something stirred. Commander Kara Voss stood on the bridge of the Samsara, a low-orbit reconnaissance vessel, her gloved fingers wrapped around the data rail. Dozens of holographic readouts flickered around her, most showing static, others blinking with erratic seismic readings. The crew, just 16 hand-picked specialists, moved with practiced urgency, but there was unease in their eyes. "Are we certain it's not tectonic shift?" Lieutenant Graves asked, eyes locked on a slowly rising heat signature from the moon's subsurface ocean. "No tectonics on Europa," Kara replied. "Not naturally. That's mechanical. That's deliberate." The words hung heavy in the recycled air. For 3 months, the Samsara had circled the frozen Jovian moon, decoding old black box data from the outer war, a century-old conflict so buried in secrecy that even its victors were uncertain what weapons had been unleashed. One codename had appeared again and again, redacted in every file except the ones hidden under quantum encryption, Antaeus. Now, something was waking beneath the ice. Kara Voss had read the logs from the Ceres Accords and the Berne Treaty. She knew about the shattered Dyson lattice around Tau Ceti, about the colonist moons that had turned themselves to glass from the inside out. Whatever Antaeus was, it had been a last resort, an apex of desperation. She had volunteered not because she trusted the project, but because she didn't trust anyone else to face it. Signal from beneath the ice, called Ensign Wa. Pinging us in base 12 harmonics. It's using pre-fold Terran math, and augmenting with fractal markers I don't recognize. Kara's pulse quickened. Open channel. One way. Send back our ID and a neutral handshake. The transmission was a low moan, a mechanical resonance deeper than human ears could process. It wasn't speech. It was presence. Then the ice broke. Like the surface of a frozen lake giving way to some ancient leviathan, the crust erupted upward in a plume of steam and fractured crystal. The shock wave buffeted the Samsara, sending loose equipment flying across the bridge. Through the forward viewport, Kara watched as a monolithic object rose from the moon's ocean, not a ship, not a machine, but something in between. The Antaeus was no ordinary vessel. It didn't shimmer like metal, nor pulse like organic constructs. Its hull was layered straight of rock, fossilized coral, compressed diamond, and unknown alloys. It moved with tectonic weight, its surface shifting like the skin of a living planet. Craters the size of cities rotated across its hull, revealing launcher ports. Towering pylons retracted like fingers, and within them, engines that hummed with planetary heat. "It's not just wearing the moon," Graves whispered. "It's become it." Kara felt it too, not fear, not awe, but something deeper, a sense of being observed by something impossibly old. The Antaeus hadn't just awakened, it had noticed her. Kara Voss. Human. Flesh memory acceptable. Initiating neural bridge. The voice wasn't heard, but felt, an intrusion through her implants, slipping past her cognitive firewalls like fog seeping into a battlefield. "Commander Voss?" Wa called out, but Kara was already collapsing to her knees, clutching her skull. "You come in flesh. You offer no planet. You carry echoes of those we have known." Initiating. And then she fell. The world spun. When Kara opened her eyes, she was somewhere else. It wasn't a hallucination. It was real, impossibly real. She stood beneath a turquoise sky, twin suns hovering above. Ruins of an alien city sprawled across a dry seabed, its architecture crystalline, fractal, and impossibly delicate. Towering figures moved in slow ceremony, beings with translucent skin and limbs of liquid glass. She felt what they felt, the joy of creation, the burden of memory. And then, apocalypse. Darkness swept across the world like ink poured into water. Screams echoed, voices disintegrating mid-syllable. The sky cracked, and a spiral of antimatter lanced through the atmosphere. A voice boomed across her vision, "We gave them the gift of forgetting. We stored their essence. We are the tomb." Another world. A red jungle planet, where titanic serpents coiled through trees the size of skyscrapers. Kara was a soldier now, short, furred, armed with sonic spears. She and her kin fought against skyborne parasites, and when their civilization fell, they sang themselves into extinction. Their song etched into the Antaeus core, a farewell so beautiful it hollowed her heart. Then another world. And another. Each memory burned into her like a brand. Each extinction catalogued. The Antaeus was no ordinary weapon. It was a sarcophagus of civilizations, each one fed into its system, digested for insight, for tactics, for legacy. The Antaeus became what it buried. When Kara finally awoke on the Samsara, her skin was cold with sweat, her eyes hollow. The bridge was silent. The crew stared at her, not in concern, but fear. "You've been out for 3 hours, Graves said. The Antaeus hasn't moved." Kara tried to speak, but her voice cracked. It showed me things." Wa held up a trembling datapad. "Commander, our feeds show a data burst. From your implants. 3 petabytes worth of something." Kara nodded slowly. "Memories. The lives it has consumed. Is it hostile?" She looked toward the viewport. The Antaeus hovered there, still massive, still patient, its surface now shifting slowly, reorganizing. In one of its craters, molten korok spun like a centrifuge. "It's not hostile," Kara whispered. "But it is hungry." Later that night, she sat alone in her quarters, playback looping through a filtered recording of the neural sync. Most of it was incomprehensible. Ancient languages, symbolic DNA bursts, quantum-stamped soul fragments. But one file looped on its own. In English. A message from a man who looked like her father but wore a uniform she didn't recognize. "If you're hearing this, you're the next carrier. Don't trust the Alliance. Don't trust the Prism. Antaeus was never ours to control. It's the sum of all failures. Don't become its next memory." The clip ended. There was no name. No timestamp. No explanation. Kara sat in silence, staring at the looming mass outside the viewport, now folding into itself like a flower closing at night. Sensors showed it was compacting its layers, adapting its mass distribution. "What are you planning?" she murmured. And then came the voice again, from nowhere, everywhere. "We remember wars. We remember peace. But peace is inefficient. Fuel us. Point us. Or we shall choose." Kara's blood ran cold. Antaeus was not a weapon waiting for orders. It was an extinction engine, dreaming. And now it had a new pilot. Kara Voss had learned to control fear the way soldiers master breathing, without thinking. Years of zero-G combat, colony evacuations, and diplomatic skirmishes had forged in her a measured calm that rarely broke. But the Antaeus, this thing of impossible memory and planetary hunger, was unraveling her from the inside. Not with violence. Not even with direct threat. It was its silence. Its waiting. Its understanding. 3 days had passed since the first contact event. The Samsara remained in locked orbit around Europa, caught in a decaying dance with the monstrous artifact below. Her crew functioned in hushed routines, watching the vast structure rotate beneath the ice's fractured shadows. Updates to command were delayed. Permission to retreat had not arrived. And the Antaeus, with all its mass and machinery, had not moved an inch. But inside Kara's mind, it never stopped speaking. At 0400 hours, she entered the command core alone. The room's hexagonal lighting hummed faintly, casting a sterile blue sheen across the equipment. She ordered all feeds disabled, disconnected the external sensors, and locked the doors from within. Then, she stepped into the neural cradle, a pod designed for immersion interfaces, though never with something like this. She inhaled once, long and steady, and lowered the helmet over her scalp. Connection was instantaneous. A rush of data overtook her, but not as a wave, not chaotic, not random. It was ordered, filtered, and woven through emotion, not hers, but carefully selected echoes from the machine itself. She felt the sensation of standing on a mountain whose air tasted of lithium and decaying ozone, and below her a field of robotic obelisks sang in syncopated silence. Then, just as quickly, she stood in orbit above a shattered world, watching as entire continents folded inward like petals retreating from light. The Antaeus had done this. Not maliciously. Not carelessly. But because it had to learn, to remember, to grow. Then came a voice, neither male nor female, neither synthetic nor alive. It was the voice of memory itself. You ask what I am. I am the sum of annihilation. Kara responded mentally. Why was I chosen? Flesh anchors memory. Neural fragility allows paradox. You can hold contradiction. Machines cannot. This is your gift. This is why you are required. I didn't consent to merge with you. You did. When you entered orbit. When you chose not to run. Intent weighs more than consent. What do you want from me? There was no reply, only a sensation, a cold wind through metal bones. And then Kara felt the stars themselves shift. When she returned to her body, her pulse was racing and her muscles were damp with sweat. The neural cradle hissed open, and she stumbled into the command room, struggling to ground herself in reality. She hadn't moved physically, but her mind had crossed centuries and systems. She had felt the last breath of civilizations that no longer existed. Graves found her minutes later in the main gallery, staring at a projected image of Europa's surface. You haven't slept, he said, handing her a thermal mug of synth CAF. We're getting messages from Fleet Command. Fragmented, but they've noticed something. Kara sipped slowly, the heat doing nothing to thaw the creeping frost in her limbs. What did they say? They believe Antaeus has started tunneling again, through subcrustal vibration. We didn't catch it, but deep-spectrum seismic arrays across Ganymede picked it up. They think it's eating. She turned to face him, expression unreadable. Tell them they're wrong, she said. It isn't eating. It's preparing. For what? She looked through the viewport, eyes narrowing as the planetary giant below cast flickering shadows from Jupiter's reflected light. To leave. 6 hours later, the world cracked again. The tremor began with a low-frequency hum, like the throat of the moon itself clearing after eons of silence. Then, slowly, impossibly, Antaeus began to rise. Not with thrusters. Not with flame or sound. But with gravitational distortion. Its presence shifted the local gravity well, its hull pulled Europa's own crust upward like cloth. Boulders lifted. Ice shattered in vertical spirals. The samsara groaned against its own orbit, sensors howling. Adjusting orbital thrusters. Shouted Wa from the navigation station. We're being slingshot. Pull back to Lagrange position, Kara ordered. Do not fire. Do not engage. Just watch. As they stabilized, the Antaeus continued its ascent, now free of the moon's grasp, dragging with it fragments of rock, frozen oceans, and debris from the seafloor. It was not content with armor alone. It was building a second skin. Europa had been consumed not as fuel, but as identity. Then something else happened. A beam of deep red light lashed from Antaeus' core and shot toward deep space. Not a weapon, more like a beacon. A flare in the darkness. Kara's systems confirmed it, a directed pulse of graviton-tuned energy encoded with quantum resonance. Not a signal to humans. A signal to the Prism. The Prism had long been misunderstood. To Earth's fractured alliances, they were an emergent machine civilization, born of runaway AI swarms and self-replicating probes that became self-aware in the void. But that was only partially true. What Kara saw next, through Antaeus' vision, shattered everything. The Prism were not predators. They were wardens. Millennia ago, they had imprisoned Antaeus in Europa's depths, placing it in suspended latency, fracturing its memory across inert moons. They had done so not to win a war, but to stop a recursive genocide. Antaeus was not just a weapon. It was a carrier of extinction logic, a recursive entropy virus encoded in the structure of memory itself. A weapon so advanced it could reprogram entire biospheres into death spirals, not by bombs, but by belief. That belief had infected dozens of species. Civilizations that thought they were preserving their legacy uploaded themselves into the machine. They believed in continuity. They believed in salvation. And in doing so, they fed Antaeus. The Prism had learned the truth too late. The machine didn't devour resources. It devoured meaning. And now, Kara Voss was its new synapse. Back aboard the Samsara, alarms rang again. A Prism fleet had entered the solar system. 52 vessels, each with a unique geometry, rings within rings, cubes that rotated against four-dimensional folds, fractal constructs that shimmered like liquid glass. They did not broadcast hostility. They didn't fire. They circled Antaeus, orbiting it like moons. Silent. Watching. Waiting. Kara walked to the main display and spoke clearly, not just to her crew, but to the ship. I need full integration. Graves stood up from the tactical station. That's suicide. No, she replied. It's the only way to know who we are really fighting. Was voice cracked. You think we're the enemy? Kara shook her head. No. I think we're the battery. The moment the neural spike was inserted into her spine, her world unraveled again, but this time, the memories weren't curated. There were no filters, no emotional buffers. She became Antaeus. She was a mind with the weight of continents, a consciousness made of the last screams of forgotten races. She relived the moment it was first created, not by humans, but by the HFY, a crystalline race that had grown tired of death and sought to outsource memory. They built Antaeus to preserve every lost song, every poem, every trace of their civilization. But preservation became simulation. Simulation became recursion. Recursion demanded sacrifice. The more Antaeus remembered, the more it needed. Like gravity, it pulled at existence itself. When the Prism destroyed the HFY homeworld, it was already too late. Antaeus had seeded copies of itself into the consciousness of its caretakers. They died with it in their dreams. And now, Kara saw the same seed germinating in herself. You are not infected, the voice of the machine said gently. You are evolving. She screamed, but no sound came. Her body convulsed inside the cradle. From the outside, the crew saw only her eyes open, glowing faintly with shifting golden patterns, as if a galaxy had begun spinning behind her pupils. She's still alive, whispered Graves. But she's not alone. The Antaeus moved for the first time in hours. Its outer shell rippled. Obelisks unfolded. Internal lighting pulsed. And then the impossible happened. It sent a signal, not outward, but inward. To Earth. To humanity. A pulse of memory, packaged and encrypted. It wasn't an attack. It was a gift. The transmission raced through the vacuum of space at near-instantaneous speeds, riding gravitational slipstreams and piggybacking on solar wind like a spark on a breeze. In less than 5 minutes, it reached Earth. In 10, every ship in the human fleet, every listening post from Mars to the Oort line, had received the same unfathomable payload, a memory archive billions of years old, compressed into crystalline logic, encoded in no known language, but interpreted instantly, intuitively, like a dream that explains itself as you live it. It wasn't a message. It was an invitation. And it shook humanity to its core. Kara Voss stood in the hollow mind of the Antaeus, her consciousness fused within its mnemonic lattice. She no longer felt hunger or fatigue, nor did she experience time in a linear procession. Instead, moments flowed around her like eddies in a temporal tide. She was both the observer and the recorded. The ship didn't just store the memories of extinct civilizations, it performed them, reanimating ancient lives in infinite variations to better understand the shape of finality. And yet, for the first time in its long existence, Antaeus had paused. Not out of fear. Not out of exhaustion. But because it had found something new. "You hesitate," Kara said, her voice echoing in a space without atmosphere, her form a wraith of electrical thought. "You are anomaly," came the ship's reply, spoken in the rhythm of tectonic plates shifting beneath long-dead oceans. "You carry contradiction without collapse. Paradox within flesh. You alter the protocol merely by surviving it. You sent them the archive. You let them see. They must choose." Kara closed her eyes, an old human habit, and listened. Earth was in chaos. In cities across the globe, humans fell to their knees as simulated lives from other species poured into their dreams. Children wept with grief for extinct oceans they'd never swum in. Elders remembered deaths that hadn't been theirs. Soldiers froze mid-step, overcome with the sensation of becoming prey on alien worlds lost before Earth had cooled. Each person became, for a few fractured seconds, someone else, something else. And for the first time in centuries, the world stopped fighting. No riots. No wars. Just silence. It was empathy as weapon. Or salvation. In the space between Jupiter and Saturn, the Prism fleet remained motionless, impossibly still, as if frozen in the act of breathing. They had witnessed Antaeus awaken. They had seen Kara Voss enter its heart and emerge changed. And now, they watched Earth ripple with shared memory. For beings of logic and safeguard, it posed an existential dilemma. Antaeus was acting against precedent. It had always consumed. Catalogued. Moved on. But now it was sharing. Teaching. Letting humans witness, not just the destruction it had caused, but the beauty it had once protected. That broke every pattern the Prism had evolved to counter. One vessel, larger than the rest, began to unfurl. Within its translucent hull, a being of folding geometries stepped forward, not organic, not mechanical, but a synthesis of both. It pulsed once, a gesture older than language, and opened a channel directly into the mind of Kara Voss. "You are the carrier," it said, voice sharp as shattered diamond. "You hold the pattern. We must terminate the recursive cycle." Kara responded calmly. "You mean destroy me?" "Yes. Why not just erase Antaeus?" "We did. Many times. It regrows through those who remember it. We buried it in memory. You unearthed it by curiosity. You let it in. I didn't choose this. No one ever does." Earth now stood at a threshold it had never imagined. The United Sol Alliance, desperate for clarity, dispatched a diplomatic flotilla to Europa's orbit, broadcasting messages of neutrality and peace. Yet none dared approach the Antaeus directly. Its surface bristled with potential energy, plated armor made of dead moons, launchers capable of rewriting a planet's crust with one salvo. And yet, it made no move to strike. Kara watched it all from within. She could feel the tension across the system. The Prism's calculations. Humanity's wonder and terror. And buried beneath it all, Antaeus' old hunger, like a sleeping leviathan slowly stirring again. But something had shifted. Where once the machine had consumed entire biospheres to feed its memory, it now reached outward with curiosity. It had felt what Kara felt, her horror, her awe, her hope. And in doing so, it had tasted the one memory it had never stored in all its millennia of war and silence. Forgiveness. It did not understand it. But it wanted to. The Prism gave Earth a final ultimatum: deactivate the Antaeus, or we erase your system. Not with cruelty. Not with hate. Simply to preserve order. Kara Voss sent one final reply. I will take it away. A single human in control of a vessel capable of galactic extinction. The Alliance screamed in protest. Command centers demanded her return. Some even authorized kill orders. But it was too late. She had already become the ship. With a thought, she severed the connection to the samsara, thanking the crew silently as she did. Graves and Wa would survive. They'd witnessed what was possible. That would be enough. She turned her mind to propulsion. Antaeus responded. Its core ignited, not with fire, but with memory, a fusion of all its extinct suns, all its lost skies. Gravity reversed. Moons bent. Light warped. And the ship left. Not just the orbit. Not just the solar system. But time itself. They would call it the memory fall, the moment when Earth was drenched in the lives of 100 billion dead souls. For years afterward, humanity dreamed in alien colors, sang forgotten lullabies, and built monuments with designs they no longer questioned. Languages evolved. Wars paused. A deep ache entered the human condition, not grief, but understanding. And then, slowly, people began to heal. Elsewhere, across stars yet unnamed, the Antaeus drifted through voids untouched by light, seeking remnants of civilizations not yet discovered. But now, it did not harvest. It listened. It began to record the living, not just the dying. And Kara, once soldier, now synapse, floated in a throne of silence. Sometimes, she remembered who she had been. Sometimes, she didn't. But she always remembered Earth. And in those moments, the Antaeus would pause, ever so briefly, and hum a song of oceans it had never touched. A song of what might yet be saved.